This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutterdime. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, March 26, 1997, one of the bloodiest NHL games of all time happened. And one of the biggest rivalry games of all time happened. It was the Avalanche and the Red Wings. 1997, Joe Louis Arena. It was a battle royale, a fight-filled fest. So, anyway, I got a lot to get through. Now, first and foremost, I'd like to thank my good buddy Bill Lang for showing me this Red Wings Avalanche documentary, the E60 documentary Unrivaled, which I kind of hinted at in the Vladdy Konstantinov birthday boy thing. But yeah, I watched Unrivaled with Bill, and it was like, holy Saint Laurent, what a job they did for 2 hours and all that, and the big rivalry. So, anyway, the Avalanche Red Wings fight was all because of one man, Claude Lemieux, and his chicken shit tactics and all that, if you will. Anyway, the Avalanche Red Wings rivalry didn't really start with that whole Claude Lemieux incident, which I will talk to you when I give you the full context. But here's what's up in the hood. So, it's the 95-96 season. Colorado is hosting Detroit in their first NHL game in the state of Colorado in 13 years. The Avalanche's home opener is against the Detroit Red Wings. And you're thinking, hang on a sec, I grew up in the early 90s. Since when did Colorado have a hockey team? Well, the problems with the provincial government, the finances of the Canadian dollar, and just basically the on-ice product, even though that they were the top team in the Eastern Conference in the short 94-95 season, the Quebec Nordiques flew to Denver. So after a first-round playoff loss to the New York Rangers, the province of Quebec lost one of their two hockey teams. And, the Montreal versus Quebec rivalry, Quebec City rivalry, is still huge to this day. It should never have gone. So anyway, all the Nordiques players would now become Avalanche players, although Quebec would make some trades. Before the season started, Quebec would do a 3-team trade with the Islanders and Devils, and the Avalanche would get Claude Lemieux. Somehow, in some way, the Devils got rid of their Conn Smythe Trophy winning player. And guess the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, Claude Lemieux. And guess who his Devils beat in the 95 finals? That's right, Detroit. It was Detroit. So they beat the Red Wings, the Wingdings, as I call them. So anyway, the Avalanche were there, and their first home game was against the Detroit Red Wings, in which Detroit, I believe, won that game. And Yui Krupp was lost for seemingly the season with an injury. However, Krupp would come back near the end of the regular season and then shock everyone by scoring the overtime goal that helped the Avalanche win the Stanley Cup in 96. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but anyway. So the Avalanche Red Wings would face each other in the 96 conference finals. Colorado did decently take care of Vancouver and Chicago in overtime in a couple of series. And Detroit actually was pushed to Game 7 by St. Louis in the second round. People forget about the fact that the Red Wings, 62 wins in 95-96, which set the record, which is kind of biased because the Red Wings played in 82 games, whereas the previous champion of that record, the 60-win Montreal Canadiens of 1977, played in 80 games. And let's not forget about the fact that the 1977 Habs didn't have the benefit of overtime in case the game was tied after regulation. Overtime wouldn't be back till 1983. So the simple fact is that, the Red Wings won 62 games, and they were needing to get to the Stanley Cup to win and become the greatest team of all time, if you will. But of course, the Red Wings got scared off and almost lost to the Blues in Game 7 thanks to Steve Yzerman's double overtime goal off of a Wayne Gretzky turnover. Yes, Gretzky was a Blue. That happened. But anyhow, so that's another piece of the puzzle. Now, Colorado had a secret weapon in net by the name of Patrick Roy, and you're thinking, Patrick Roy went to Colorado as an Avalanche goalie from Quebec. Even though Patrick Roy was born in Quebec, he was not a Quebec Nordique. He was a Montreal Canadian. Of course, there's another piece of the puzzle involving the Red Wings, because it was the Red Wings that kind of chased Patrick Roy out of Montreal and cost him his grief. I did a sports catastrophe on December 2nd about Patrick Roy's performance in '95 against the Red Wings, which the Red Wings won that game. Their final time at the Montreal Forum for the Red Wings, 11-1, because at the time the Red Wings and Habs were playing in different conferences. So the Red Wings won 11-1. Patrick Roy had a terrible game. He was let in for 9 of the 11 goals, and then after Pat Javonsky finally came to relieve him, Roy went past the bench, trying to get to his goalie stool, but then when Mario Tremblay gave him some smugness, Roy decided to pass by Tremblay again, and then went to the box seat of Canadiens president Ronald Corey and says, "This is my last game in Montreal." Of course, Mario Tremblay tried to explain himself, saying that maybe I should have pulled them at the 5-6, but I'd say, "Patrick, you're our goalie." Bullshit. Sorry, but that's the way I wrote. Patrick Roy did get chastised for it, saying that why would you want to leave Montreal and all that. But I mean, dude was let in for 9 goals. He should have started the second period. He should have been off the bench. I mean, on the bench in the second period. But yeah, the Red Wings had 11-1. But Detroit did not anticipate Patrick Roy being traded to Colorado, the team that they faced in the first game of the '96 season. All that. So Roy was in net. So it was a back and forth affair. Colorado was up 3-2, headed to Game 6 on home ice. If the Red Wings won, it's Game 7 back in Detroit. If the Avalanche won, they would be going to the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, at the time, there was still a question of whether it be the powerful Pittsburgh Penguins of Mario Lemieux and co., or will it be the upstart Florida Panthers. It would have been nice to see a Lemieux-Roy playoff round. We almost saw that in '93 in the conference finals, but Pittsburgh shockingly lost to the Islanders in the division finals. Regardless. So it's Game 6. Early in the first period, Claude Lemieux was trying to make a check on Chris Draper of the Red Wings. Unfortunately, he checked him from behind, smashing Draper's face into the boards. It didn't look bad for Draper, but the injuries would be huge. He had a broken jaw, shattered cheek, and orbital bone, which needed reconstructive surgery, meaning his jaw had to be wired shut, and numerous stitches. Lemieux was rightfully booted from the game and given a 2-game suspension for the Stanley Cup Finals. Red Wings lost that Game 6, and the Avalanche were going to the Stanley Cup Finals, in which they swept the Panthers. So, of course, that error was a big mistake. Claude Lemieux, even though he was booted from the game, was allowed to take part in the handshake line, which was stupid. The NHL should have just said, you're suspended from the game, you're out of the game, you don't get to do the on-ice celebrations. And then Dino Ciccarelli said at the postgame, "I can't believe I shook that guy's hand. That pisses me right off." And rightfully so. I kind of was hoping for the Avalanche to win that game. But, I can't excuse Claude Lemieux's actions. That was just terrible. And Chris Draper, coming back from all that stuff done to him with his cheek and all that. I feel for the guy. So, anyway, it just was shocking and all that. The Avalanche and Red Wings would actually play each other 3 games before March 26th without incident. Well, mostly because Claude Lemieux was hurt for the first few games of the Avalanche Red Wings matchups. So he didn't get to play. And the third game was in Denver. So obviously the Red Wings were going to destroy Lemieux in Denver. That would be wrong. So they were waiting for March 26th in Detroit, of all things, and all that. Scotty Bowman basically said Lemieux's hit on Draper was terrible and used a lack of remorse as a rallying cry to get his team to add a physical edge to the game. And the Red Wings did. The Red Wings picked up Brandon Shannon in a trade from Hartford, and that helped out. So anyway, with 9 fights in this March 26th game, it was huge. The Detroit News actually printed a wanted poster of Lemieux with a prison number and all that, and called him a carjacker. There was a fight between Brett Severin and Jamie Pusher in 4:45 for the first period. Nothing big. And then Kirk Mulkey would fight Rene Corbet at 10:14. But at 18:22, the third fight in the first period, that's when things happened. There was a collision between Urger Larionov of the Red Wings and the Avalanche's Peter Forsberg. Terry McCarty, who is the enforcer of the Red Wings, wanted to avenge his teammate, and decides to cold cock Lemieux. Claude Lemieux for some strange reason. McCurdy would lay blows on Lemieux, who fell to the ice and covered his head, or turtled, as the popular phrase is. McCurdy beat up on Lemieux and all that. He actually dragged Lemieux to the boards and kneed him to the head before the two were separated by officials. After seeing what McCurdy was doing to Lemieux, Patrick Waugh decided, screw this, I'm going to help my teammate out, and decided to try to defend his teammate. Brandon Shanahan actually hit Patrick Waugh with a clothesline that sent him sprawling to the ice. It was like, what the heck, Shanahan? So Shanahan would fight Adam Foote. Mike Vernon, who was in net for the Red Wings, actually took matters in his own paws and says, you know what, I'm going to go after Waugh. Actually, no. I thought Vernon would fight Waugh, but no. Allegedly, he was trying to get Foote off of Shanahan, but Waugh saw this and wanted to destroy Vernon. So they decided to have a goalie fight and all that. Waugh easily lost that fight to Vernon. Anyway, McCurdy actually dragged Lemieux's body to where Draper was standing on the Red Wings bench for some strange reason. So anyway, the brawl happened. Forsberg and Larionov were given 2 minutes for roughing. Waugh and Vernon were given minor penalties for roughing and majors for fighting each other. McCarty got a double minor, but was not thrown out. And Colorado had a power play. Vernon thought he was ejected because of his fight with Waugh. And I'm actually shocked that Vernon and Waugh were not disqualified. I'm surprised that McCarty wasn't given a game misconduct for what he did. Anyway, Forsberg would actually not play in that game because he aggravated an injury. And there was actually patches of blood on the ice with the McCarty-Lemieux incident. It was, that blood ended up on the boards near the Red Wings bench. And Waugh had a gash on his forehead. Anyway, strange as it was, after the broadcast, 15 seconds later, Adam Denmarsh and Vladimir Konstantinov would fight. There would be 5 more fights in the second period. Shanny and Foote would fight 4 seconds into the second period. Mike Keane would fight Thomas Holmstrom. Brett Severin and Aaron Ward would fight. Severin and Ward were both ejected because of a secondary fight. McCarty and Denmarsh would fight. And Jimmy Pusher would fight Yui Krupp. So the score was 5-5. It was a tight affair. But, ironically enough, it was Darren McCarty who scored the overtime winner, assisted by Shanahan and Larionov. So Darren McCarty beat up on Claude Lemieux, beat him up for all Detroit people for what he did to Draper, which was, a dirty hit by Claude Lemieux. I gotta say that. It was from behind. There's no doubt about it. But McCarty scored the overtime winner. So basically, he was the hero for many reasons. And the funny thing was, that actually was Mike Verdon's 300th career win as a goalie. And it brought the Red Wings into the forefront. It actually was huge, as Red Wings broadcaster Ken Cal said that it was a turning point for the team, how the team's success went and all that. Mark Crawford, the Colorado coach, said, why did McCarty not get a game misconduct for his instigation and fight with Lemieux? Anyway, it didn't matter. So the Red Wings won that game. Ironically enough, the Red Wings and Avs would meet in the conference finals in Game 4 at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. There was a lot of fighting and all that. Mark Crawford would actually scream obscenities right at Scotty Bowman across the glass separating 2 benches. So anyway, the Red Wings won that game 6-0, and then subsequently would win in 6 games, knocking the Avalanche out of the conference finals like they did to the Red Wings the previous year. So Colorado had a better record, but they were knocked out in the conference finals in Detroit, like Detroit the previous year. The Red Wings ended up winning the game, winning the Stanley Cup, sweeping the Flyers 4. McCarty and Lemieux would actually fight November 11, 1997 at the Joe Louis Arena, but Lemieux did not turtle. He fought McCarty, and it kind of got him to be in a good way. All of that. However, in April of 98, Red Wings and Avs would meet at Joe Louis Arena again, and Patrick Waugh decided to fight the other Red Wing goalie. That's Chris Osgood. But this time, the referees booted them from the game, calling them game misconduct. So they combined for 228 penalty minutes, and the Red Wings would win the game 2-0, and in '98 would win the Stanley Cup. So, that was huge and all that. The rivalry would die down in a sense because of trades, retirements, and free agency and all that. So anyway, on March 26, 2022, last year on this day, McCarthy and Lemieux would actually meet at a bar to rewatch this game, and it was the focal point for Unrivaled, which came out June 26, 2022, which was pretty impressive. It took 3 months for that stuff. But yeah, that was just brutality at its finest. I mean, Claude Lemieux kind of did deserve it in a sense, and it would have been done sooner if Lemieux was healthy for the game in Detroit the first time, but not so much. But anyway, yeah, Claude Lemieux asked for it. But anyway, it was a good brawl, and it was good to see Unrivaled and see it from both sides of the coin. And now Bill's become a Claude Lemieux obsessed fan. But you know what? Obsession sometimes works out. So all the more power to him. But anyway, yeah, it was a great time, and it helped Detroit get the momentum they needed to win the Stanley Cup and end their 42-year cup drought. So, why can you say? Anyway, I'm done diving to do.